From news and product reviews to husbandry, habitat, and conservation, we discuss all things reptile. With special guests from all around the world, we talk about the reptiles we keep, the unique ways we keep them, and how we can work together to push herpetoculture forward and preserve the species we love. From the guys who brought you Greg's Reptile Studio and Hudson Valley Reptile and Rescue, this is the Reptile Studio.
So we're a little brief introduction, Greg. Just, welcome back to the studio podcast. Today we have the Reptile Studio Podcast. Today we have Mariah Healey from ReptiFiles, myself, Brian from Hudson Valley Reptile and Rescue, and Greg from
hi, Greg
from the Reptile Studio. Greg's Reptile Studio, excuse me, right?
Greg's Reptile Studio.
So, Greg, you want to ask Mariah the first question? You want me to ask questions? What would you like to do, sir?
So Mariah, thank you for coming on. The first thing that I was thinking of is, have you because the questions that I read to you were for somebody else, even though they're basically the same. So how long have you been into reptiles?
It really depends on where you start. What do you consider into reptiles? I've found them interesting, I think, about as far back as I can remember. My family has an old picture of me, I think, at a Scales and Tails exhibition in Pennsylvania when I was like 4, maybe, petting some kind of water monitor. So that definitely, I think, is probably a pretty decent starting point, if not earlier. I've always found reptiles really interesting, just different, and I've always been an animal lover, so I just took that right in stride. As a kid, I wanted my own pet lizard. I saved up my allowance to get my first anole, and so it's been a lifelong interest, I think.
Yeah, no, I can say the same thing for myself too.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
We're a different breed, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Usually starts early.
And I'm noticing that like more and more, that watching different podcasts or watching different, videos on YouTube and stuff, you got to hear different things, things that, you're not really used to hearing.
I think
it's also becoming more mainstream.
Right. That's what I was just about to say. I think this is one our hobby has come up out of the basement. It's something that in my lifetime has become very forefront of a lot of different things that I'm not used to. Everybody used to look at me a little off growing up. What are you doing?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go feed some snakes.
Yeah,
you have that
with snake keeping.
You have that hesitant moment where you say something like that and you read the room. Now it's like, oh, really? What kind of snakes do you keep? And it's very different.
Yeah, for sure. My family was friends with our pediatrician, and so I think definitely one of the things that started my perception of reptile keeping started on a very good note, because my pediatrician and her husband, their home was filled with animals, just filled. And to me being 6, 5 at the time, it was paradise. And they had this sandfish skink named Wink, and they would stick a pencil in there and like prod around, and every time we go over and be like, can I see Wink? And so show me. And so that's kind of the image that I grew up with, was fortunately not the basement taboo of reptile keeping, but rather these animals can be part of your home, they can be part of your life, something that you show to friends. And I think that was really influential also in the, growing up and wanting my own personal zoo.
I think it's something we all share. That aspiration is among fellow reptile keepers is just one of those. You say something like that and everybody's like, oh yeah, no, that's exactly where I'm headed if I can, and it's a shared goal by a lot of people. We all as a group, for the most part, want to bring these animals into that forefront, even more so than they are now, into that mainstream situation.
And we'll be better off for it, that's for sure.
Right. a lot of the amphibian species are indicator species. That in itself alone, getting that fact out there for people to really understand, if you start seeing a massive loss in toads and frogs and amphibians in general, you then know where the health of the ecosystem actually is. Which,
Yeah.
if I
And
said that,
systems.
if I said that in a group of people 20 years ago, they'd look at me like I was completely ridiculous. But now it's something that is apparent and people do really understand it. And it's a remarkable thing to be. So I'm not like an old timer huge old timer. I'm only 39, but I have been keeping reptiles for 25 years, and seeing the difference from 25 years ago to now is remarkable. Legislation changing, certain things that are good coming along, and other things that aren't good are also coming along with that. But that's, again, we don't police ourselves in some states. I live in New York, and I have one of the heavily most restricted list of reptiles as a state that you can possibly have. And I run a rescue. I'm totally for most of them. I don't want my neighbor having alligators, and I don't want those scenarios playing out that way.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I also think that law enforcement should work with individuals, and it should be at least accessible, maybe not out of the reach of every normal human being, to be able to obtain the animals. And for the last 5 or 6 years, our state wasn't doing anything. I was licensed for a very long time to work with those kinds of animals, but in the future of the rescue, pet reptiles need more help. And I can have 20 leopard geckos in my care for the same amount of time and the same amount of money that it cost me for 3 weeks of an alligator. What's the math there? What do I want to give the home to?
Exactly.
So what was your reasoning going from keeper or just enjoying reptiles in general into the push for better husbandry? The ReptiFiles name is big. I mean, I'm on your website. I use your website a lot. Whenever we have an adopter come in, I always share your care sheets, your care guides. I feel like they're the most comprehensive out there, period. And
That's what I'm going for.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. But what was the moment where you went from that in awe of reptiles to wanting to change the way that people do things?
Yeah, it's I think it was a really gradual process, honestly. I started with a sandbox site, just kind of like, oh, I'll make my own website and play around and see what we're going with. And around that same time, I had a couple of bearded dragons, and I remembered how difficult it was to find what looks to be reputable information on the internet about caring for bearded dragons. There was a lot of conflict and a lot of confusion. And so when I started this website, I decided, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to just kind of compile the research that I did for myself and then put it online for other people to reference, just kind of simplify for others. That's really what it was. And it was also so I could have something on my phone to reference at any given time when I had a question. And I did that for my Doomerals boa that I took in shortly after that, my blue-tongued skinks. That was probably around the time of the turning point, was when I took in my and rehabilitated my northern blue-tongued skink, because I was taking a class in college at the time. It was technical writing, and my professor was very formative in that period. We had a final project of, okay, write a technical manual on anything that you want. And I'm like, wait, anything? And he's like, yep,
there you go.
Anything. Yep, as long as it meets the length requirement. And I'm like, oh, I can meet your length requirement.
Yeah.
So I took a deep dive into blue-tongued skinks and gave it my all to create a technical manual on how to care for blue-tongued skinks. And it was that guide has improved a great deal since that point. And my understanding of reptile husbandry has improved a great deal since that point. But right there was my turning point, because I talked to my professor and he said, you're so passionate about this, you could make a career out of this. And I went, really? Like, that kind of thing is something I could actually make my life? And he said, yeah, why not? And I'd never heard that in my life. Like, around that time, I was more fixated on other paths, but realizing that I had this passion and I could turn it into something more and help people, I think is what really got me going, got me committed to creating the name ReptiFiles, taking that domain name, and really taking my first steps into creating what ReptiFiles is today. So it was kind of gradual in that my understanding of reptile husbandry has gradually improved, and there are definitely things I wish I could have skipped in that process. But there is a point, a turning point of deciding, this is something I want to do with my life.
Yeah. And I mean, I like the fact that when you go to your website, there is a specific spot that does say, these are always changing, check back, something along those lines. I can't remember what the wording was exactly, and I apologize for that. But it was, just that fact alone, the fact that you're willing to accept that I may not know it all. I am going to change it as I see fit because I have new information. That's spot on right there. 100%, absolutely the best thing the community as the reptile community needs. Somebody willing to say, this is what we're doing. This is what needs to be done. Here we are. We're going to give you as much care as we can give you. And as things change and evolve, we'll also tell you that fact too. It's good stuff.
Yeah. I've definitely had points of time where I've been in consistent contact with somebody who has consistently asked me questions on social media or through email about their animal. And they'll call me out and be like, wait, a year ago you told me this, and now you're telling me this. And I'm like, my understanding has changed a little bit. And so I've tweaked my recommendations that I give to people. So that happens more frequently than I would like, because that can sometimes give a sense of inconsistency. But the fact of the matter is, I've been keeping reptiles for a cumulative of 10, 11 years. And the hobby is so young that I am still learning so much. Every new species that I'm studying, every book that I read, every study that I skim through, I'm creating a more holistic, complete view of how reptile husbandry in its best form is supposed to go.
Right.
And sometimes I swing to more extreme and sometimes I swing more lax, and I'm just trying to pendulum my way into some kind of reptile keeping nirvana. I don't know.
But that's the way it goes. With more experience that you gain, regardless of whether it's you yourself as an individual or the hobby. Let's face it, reptiles, even in zoological settings, up until 20 years ago, were in their infancy as far as being kept in captivity. Yeah. And now we have this huge push to change the way everybody keeps things and make sure, we really understand I'm from a time before UVB, to give you an idea of it's not before UVB, but before UVB was told, snakes can benefit from it. Lizards that aren't bearded dragons and leopard geckos can benefit from that particular wavelength of light. So, I think it's a really
outdoors and with black lights.
Right. I think it's a really big change in direction for the hobby as a whole. And you're kind of spearheading it along with others. I know there are others. I'm not trying to take any credit away from them either, but at the same time, you're kind of putting it all out there. You've got the website, you've got all the information, these massive lists. I can remember I adopted a corn snake out to a family, a very intelligent, wanted to soak up as much information before they committed to it, and the whole 9 yards. And so they came and they read your care sheet on corn snakes for probably like 3 weeks. They brought the whole thing printed out. And I was like, they highlighted individual questions that they wanted to ask me. 100% right on top of what they needed to do. And needing some clarification of like, well, where does the temperature probe go for the thermostat? The conversations that I would have only guessed at 10, 12 years ago are now right in everybody's mind that are adopting these animals. And I think that's a great push. And again, you're kind of helping that also along directly, even though you're not directly influencing it. You're still influencing it in a passive way. You may not be the one having the conversation with somebody, but you're putting out the information that needs to be there. And I think that's a really good thing.
What I'm trying to do.
Yeah, and I think it's fantastic. Greg, I'm sorry, what'd you say?
The nice part about doing this more passively is I'm not I don't have to be combative with the
Yeah.
information. That's what I was doing when I was younger. I've been doing ReptiFiles for I think 6-7 years now, and in the beginning I knew a lot less and was a lot more apt to arguing with people. Now I am comfortable saying I know a lot more, and I'm not interested with arguing with people, because
Yeah.
if they don't take it at face value, your chances of changing their mind are extremely slim. So I'm very happy to just put it out there for people to take or leave with as much evidence as I can provide within reason. And, if the hobby is gradually improving as a whole, then the case by case bases are not as important to me.
Right. And
Or
that,
they
and
don't
I,
affect as much.
that's a really important fact as well, that I'd like to highlight. It is about the hobby. It's not necessarily about every single individual situation that you can change. It's about a general way of thinking.
Yes.
And I find that to be remarkable. And I mean, I figured as much, not that you and I have spoken before. I do believe I asked if at one point, I think we had an exchange of emails about the rescue being on your website or something like that. I can't recall. But aside from that, it was more of, this is what I do. Let people know I'm here in New York, kind of a thing. But I got that idea. I got that feeling that was what you were going for, is a generalized change in the entirety of the reptile community. And it's kind of due. We're not in basements anymore. We're not a bunch of people just kind of keeping our hobby to ourselves. This is something that now they're available in every pet store shelf across the country, across the world, even to some degree. And having the proper information out there is very, very important. And 25 years ago, I wish I had access to anything close to what you do. I'm sure there'd be a lot more of my generation keeping reptiles if there were more information and that was readily available at the time.
Yeah.
So another quick one, Mariah. So I look up to people like Dave Kaufman, some other people, Clint, from Clint's Reptiles. Who do you personally look up to, or not even look up to, but take information from, based on your own, what I mean? Like, who's your number, your number one and number two kind of people?
I don't know if I can put it in an itemized list. I know for sure, just going off, starting with what you said, Clint actually is the one that got me back into reptiles as an adult. We happened to be we went to the same church, and so he brought a snake or something to show the kids, and here's all these 8 to 11-year-olds, and then there's me and my husband can we see the snake too? So we kind of hit it off from there, and he got me back into reptile keeping. He was a big factor in the acquisition of our blue tongue skinks. He's actually the one who facilitated the transfer of our rehab. So yeah, he was definitely a big part in getting to where I am today, for sure. And I really appreciate Dave Kaufman's videos on recording reptiles in the wild. All of that footage, those readings, even when they're not perfect, just getting that kind of data, especially visually, of the animals in their habitat is so essential for what I do in figuring out husbandry, especially for not only the rare species, but also for the ones that are commonly kept and have a lot of folklore husbandry surrounding them. Aside from those two, one of my earliest influences was definitely Melissa Kaplan of anapsid.org. The structure of her website is kind of a database. I remember using her website.
Yeah, I definitely.
And that was my first thought when I created ReptiFiles, was I want to create a more updated version of anapsid.org. Just this massive online database that anyone can access for free with just all this great information. So that was a massive influence. Similar for Philippe de Vostoli, big inspiration there. In general, I have to say, a lot of what I do with pushing for optimized reptile husbandry comes from, actually, if I take a step back, I was one of those horse girls growing up. And so my experience with reading about the proper way to take care of horses and the ideology behind keeping these animals definitely shaped my approach to reptiles in a way that you wouldn't expect. But I've noticed this as a pattern, as a lot of horse people also cross over into the reptile realm. I can't explain it, but the pattern is there. So something, I guess, about paying attention to these animals' needs, trying to decipher body language, not necessarily looking for, I mean, yes, they're still very much companion animals and social animals, but there seems to be a bridge there that I can't adequately explain. More recent influences, I've got to say, John Courtney Smith and his theory of wild recreation was a pretty big turning point, I think, for me. I was, in developing ReptiFiles, I think I was getting the sense that it was best to care for reptiles or design their husbandry based on their evolution. But I don't think it was until I read the theory of wild recreation that everything really clicked into place for me. Like, this is what I want to be pushing people toward. This is when I'm feeling stuck on a rarer species because I can't find any information on keeping them in captivity. How am I going to figure out a way to help other people help them thrive in captivity? And so I decided to switch tracks just a little bit and start doing it the way zoos do it, which is wild recreation. So that was huge, definitely a landmark event. And then there's lots of people otherwise who have made a big splash in my understanding of reptile husbandry. I mean, Dr. Francis Baines, Roman Murin, those two have been huge in my understanding of lighting and heating for reptiles. Bill Strand and what he's been doing with chameleons and his groups. Just chameleons are so sensitive that there's not a lot. They're like dart frogs. There's not a lot you can get away with. Therefore, you've got to figure out what really works for them. And dealing with the more sensitive species and helping them figure out just to survive and breed in captivity can tell you a lot about actually how to help the more hardy ones thrive in captivity. So there's the list from the top of my head of influences there.
Yeah. No,
I'm sure there's some that
awesome
aren't.
too. And my it's funny that you talked about the horse thing, because my sister is actually a horse, like was equestrian.
Mm-hmm.
Does like equestrian stuff, and it's funny because I had brought this up to my mom in the past about just like horse people.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it also depends on what type of area you're talking about, and like what type of horse people, because
very true.
she said to me that it's the opposite. Like, they would not want to hear anything that that I have to say.
I dealt with both sides of that spectrum.
Yeah, so but no, that's definitely interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of sides to the reptile hobby, and it's always a constant. You never know what you're going to get when you wake up in the morning. If you do anything like this, first of all, working with any animal, regardless of species, you
Mm-hmm.
never know what's going to happen from day to day or moment to moment. I mean, there's days where I can open up a carpet python enclosure and everything is perfectly fine, and then there's other days that I'm now wrapped up by an 8-foot carpet and my hand hurts. It's all hit or miss. It happens. You just have different days, different things happen. I'm sure horse people go through the same situations. You never know which horse is going to act in which way, if it wants to be ridden that day or not, or if it's a workhorse, if it's going to pull correctly or in the right direction on the first try. We all do everything that we possibly can, and it's nice to see this direction going into a positive light. I know there's a lot of things on YouTube, and I know there's a lot of things that are information that have been out there for 20 years, 15 years,
Mm-hmm.
10 years.
Totally.
and now we're getting into this living wild theory. I believe that's what you referenced, living wild. Is that
Yeah, that's one way to summarize it. It's just John Courtney Smith coined the phrase wild recreation.
Wild recreation. Thank you. That was the actual terminology escaped me. I apologize, but it's a matter of, when I was starting out doing this, keeping things for the first time, I was always the guy looking at the atlas and figuring out average rainfalls and doing all of the actual congruent research that would have been wild recreation back in 99, 2000. Some people had some really good, some people had some really good books out on how to keep a pet reptile alive, but it wasn't what I wanted. I wanted a natural living vivarium in early 2000, which you couldn't find any real information back then. It was really hard to note that. And it's a really good fluid change in a good direction. And again, I thank you greatly, because I don't want to write anything anymore at all. I have a newsletter that I do once a month. That's enough for me. I don't like having to answer 1,000 questions. I'd much rather answer specific questions that relate to something that somebody may not understand. Not that the rescue isn't here. We answer anything that comes across any of our social media stuff or text message or what have you. But at the end of the day, if I don't have a reference guide, like you mentioned Melissa Kaplan, I used to use them religiously. But if you don't have something that's at least compiled with enough information for someone to be able to make an educated guess, I guess would be a better way to say, about what the meaning is. And from a text message from somebody who doesn't necessarily have the half an hour to explain it the exact same way that it's written in that paragraph on that care sheet, you can cause some really bad problems for some captive reptiles. And so it's really nice to have a reference, even if I have to help nudge them along in the right direction with the reference. That's not the point. The point is the main part of the information is already there. We don't have to start at square one. We can just add on to or show in a quick video how to, this is what we need to do, or this is what you need to do, or this is what she was referring to doing at that moment in time. So
I think all kinds to make the hobby go around for sure. And I really appreciate everyone who, the YouTubers, the TikTokers, the podcasters. See, I have no interest in that. I know I'm gonna have to formally join YouTube at some point. And I've got a couple of things still in the works. I know I've been saying that for the last 3 years, but it's still in the works. But we all have different strengths, and as long as we're using our strengths toward the same goal, we can attack it from multiple different angles. We can take multiple different perspectives, and we can speak to different learning languages. And that's the most important part.
I mean, what brings us together is the love of reptiles, regardless of any other situation that's outside of that, bearing in whatever direction you're going to be pulled or pushed. At the end of the day, everybody cares about reptiles, and I want the hobby to come together. Even in Facebook groups and all over social media, this negativity it's got to go. We need to tell everybody it's okay if you do something wrong. Here's the general right way to do it. We're not telling you you're wrong. We're just trying to save the animal. We're trying to help the animal. We're trying to do something right for the animal. I don't care who you are in any way at all.
It's never personal. Never.
It's not right. I'm not being personal. I've just got enter number here of how many years I've been keeping versus you. And I'm just trying to guide you in the direction. You were referencing before that you don't have time for fighting. When I first started and I was on Facebook, I used to do it all the time. You have your husbandry needs to change. You need to do so. And now if people ask me, this is the way I would do it. That's it. That's my opinion. You can take it or leave it. You can use it if you want to. Completely okay. I will send them. I'm sure you get notifications all the time of people tagging ReptiFiles on Facebook, and I'm definitely one of them, because there are moments where I'm just like, I don't have time for this. I will answer your question using this care sheet because it includes everything that I need to say. And
honestly, I don't mind being tagged. I'm just no longer actively looking for people.
Oh, right. Yeah. No. I don't mean you personally. I just meant a link to your website is, I'm sure you have, I'm sure it notifies you somehow on Facebook. I don't know. I don't do technical stuff. I can record, but I don't like social media much.
As you should.
It's a shame that everybody has to be there or they don't exist.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare.
especially
in this climate with the world going the way it is currently. We have to meet like this instead of in person, you know. I guess that's the best way to say it without actually saying it. So I mean, you know, Greg, is there anything that you want to talk about more? No? Yes?
No, I mean, I pretty much covered
I
everything.
think we covered all the questions. I don't want to take up our
pretty
time.
much everything that I wanted to talk about. Yeah.
Good.
All right.
So you want to tell everybody what I mean, the like 4 people that are actually going to watch this, do you want to tell them anything about what you're doing, anything upcoming that's super and awesome and amazing? I mean, other than just what you do already?
Let's see. Honestly, my big goal for 2022 is to expand the ReptiFiles care sheet database. I've been focusing on care guides for the last several years, but last year it really became apparent to me that I need to, as great as it is to make comprehensive care guides that are the length of a small book, it's not very effective in achieving my end goal of reaching as many reptile keepers as possible. Because when I'm focusing on one care guide, you know, my average rate is about every 6 months. That I am growing very, very slowly, and I do produce in-depth content, but the problem is that I can't reach as many people. So
right, if you do one a month versus one every 6 months with the same kind of information, you'd be able to reach more people just because you'd be getting the specific animal that somebody might have already that they require. Yep, I get
exactly. My end goal is to help improve the reptile hobby as a whole, which means I need to increase my scope. So starting last year, I started compiling husbandry research on fairly surface level, but still getting an idea of what breeders are doing, what environmental data is looking like, what is proven to go well, combined with my own philosophy on naturalistic keeping, and increasing the standards, and combining all of those factors. So what's proven plus my philosophy into something new, which is the ReptiFiles care sheets. They're shorter. They average about 4 to 6 pages each. Word document, 11-point font, but I can pump on a good day, I can do 2 of those a day.
Right. So that's way different.
Yeah,
it's way really different than one every 6 months.
Explosively expand. So, I mean, we're looking at, I'm only doing ReptiFiles full-time 2-3 days a week right now. So I'm able to do about 4 a week right now, is the current going rate. And so I've got a list of 150 different reptile species and subspecies that I want to hit that are just like the most commonly kept between lizards, snakes, turtles, tortoises. I just want to get that information out there. And right now I have just over 50 completed. We'll see how many of those I can knock out before I start grad school at the end of the year. And yeah, so that's the plan right now. Oh. And I guess that's the other exciting thing that's happening is I am going to be studying under Dr. Zach Loafman of West Liberty University in West Virginia. He recently published a study on the naturalistic husbandry of the false water cobra.
Okay.
And I came across this study because of my friend Dylan at the Animals at Home podcast. And I looked at the study, I'm like, this is the exact same thing that I do, but on an academic level. Are you kidding me? And at first there was like a little bit of jealousy, but then there was like, wait. And then he says something about, yeah, I run a program based on this. And I'm like, where have you been all of my life? Well, apparently not there until very recently. Because I would have jumped at that at the beginning of ReptiFiles, not having to do this myself. And yeah, it turns out zoo sciences is a thing. So I am going to be getting my master's degree in zoo sciences.
Good.
From West Liberty University starting fall 2022. And that's going to take a lot of my time, but I am really looking forward to being able to kind of formalize things a little bit, study under a professional, get a little bit more comfortable with the world of academia, and it's just going to be great. This zoos already have this down pat. I mean, they're improving just like the rest of us, but if we can take zoo standards and zoo methods and apply it into the reptile hobby, it's only going to be a good thing.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic, sounds like the direction that you're headed in is nothing but up as well as what your page is doing for the rest of the reptile hobby in itself. It can only get better from there, I'm sure.
There was one quick thing that I totally forgot about that I wanted to ask at the beginning is, what are you keeping? Like, what is that behind you? And is there anything that you don't have that you want to keep?
Oh my gosh. I mean, you ask a reptile.
Within reason.
So what you see behind me, this is my ball python enclosure. So it's a 4x2x2 Zen habitat that I've outfitted to function. It's a bioactive, technically. As in bioactive is in work in progress. But yeah, so right now she's in the cool hide over in this corner. She loves her black box hides and rarely comes out. Technically, she's in a winter cooling phase anyway. So
yeah,
that's
that time of year.
Yep, it is that time of year.
It's that time of year
in the reptile room. To my left here, I've got my ocellated skinks. So, yep, that's my ocellated skink colony, and they are a delight. I think they're one of the more underrated species. I mean, skinks in general are just great. Definitely, easily one of my favorites.
And underrated. Skinks in general are very underrated in the hobby.
They're so smart, and ocellated skinks, I mean, I say as one is looking at escaping through the roof. Good luck there, you know. They're so bold and interactive, and I mean, these guys will walk onto my hand for a mealworm any day of the week. They recognize me when I walk into the room. If they're feeling hungry, they'll come up to the glass. It helps that they're one of my more recent acquisitions, so I've made fewer mistakes with them. But they are so much fun to watch. And just right now trying to figure out how social exactly they are, whether they do okay when kept singly, or if they really do need to be kept in groups to thrive. And of course, okay, the big issue of figuring out how to differentiate males from females before it's too late. That's the main issue.
And dimorphism is very hard sometimes, depending on the species.
Just skinks in general doesn't exist. But yeah. Talking to breeders is like, yep, luck of the draw, 50-50 guess. And like, are you kidding me? Really? You're this experienced with the species and that's the best you can tell me? Great, thanks.
Yeah.
But sometimes it be that way. Other things I have, so I have a Euromastix J-Ree, so Nigerian Euromastix, orange phase, captive bred. I have a Sudan plated lizard. I think it's the Badagoy major subspecies. Don't quote me on that. I've had her she was actually a gift for my husband. We thought she was going to be a lot more calm. Turns out you get them under the right amount of UV and heat and properly energized, and all of a sudden you have a living rocket.
Yeah,
some of them
proper diet.
I have 2 blue tongue skinks. I have a Maruki Indonesian and a Northern Australian. Both male. They are both a lot of fun. They have their individual personalities for sure. And the Northern is my rehab case. He's super sweet. Let's see. That's everything in this room, I think. Oh, wait, nope. Above me is my boa, boa imperator. He's 3 years old, I want to say, and getting an upgrade soon because he definitely is outgrowing his current enclosure. Then let's see, in my cool room, I have a mossy leaf-tailed gecko, Uroplata sicerae. I have a crested gecko and a colony of mourning geckos. So yeah, the mourning geckos, it's Lord of the Flies in there. They self-regulate in an 18-18-24. I'll probably try upgrading them to something slightly bigger again eventually. But yeah, oh my gosh, they're so much fun. You can hear them chirping at each other all hours of the day. I only slightly regret putting them next to my bed.
I think we all feel some of those regrets every once in a while when something like white stumpy tree frog. No, they don't make any noise. They're good. Oh yeah, that's okay. Get 4 or 5 of them in a 24-inch by 24-inch enclosure. They make plenty of noise.
Yep.
Something you wouldn't even think of, and it's deep and loud and wakes you up in the middle of the night.
I am sure of it. In terms of species I'd love to keep, I mean, it really depends on what I'm studying at the moment. That usually influences it a lot. I really want to get my hands on a Peter's banded skink for study because there's so little known about them. So that's been really itching at the back of my mind for a while.
Yeah.
I am regretting rehoming the sandfish skink that I rehabilitated a while back. I really miss that little guy or girl. I'm not sure. But sandfish are so incredible and fun. I mean, they're little sand sharks. So I would love to have one of those again. Eventually, most people want to get a dog. I want to get a tegu. Once I have the space to devote basically a bedroom to it, I would definitely love to have the opportunity to keep and train one, just as kind of like the main household pet. I think it could be a lot of fun. Lately, I've been really partial to the idea of getting a carpet python. They're bigger snakes and therefore harder to house.
Yeah.
So that's it's something I'd like, especially Morelia Bradley. I really love them, but it's just at the end of the day, like, can I house an 8-foot snake ethically? You know?
Yeah. Yep.
So that's a question. If I did go for a larger one, I'd actually really love to work with super dwarf reticulated python.
Yeah.
I've heard amazing things about their intelligence. I think from a training standpoint, it could be really fun. Again, would definitely need the space to be able to give the enrichment that it deserves. And then mainly my big goal though is I'd love to have a facility. This is the goal that we're working toward, is eventually I want a big basement where I can keep all my reptiles in a controlled environment and have, honestly, I don't think I'll be expanding much past what I currently have, but I want to have the space to keep fosters for a certain amount of time for observation. So set them up completely, observe their care, and just be able to get a little bit more hands-on with a greater diversity of species.
Yeah.
I think that's going to help me grow the most with less commitment. As much as I'd love to, keep all of these permanently, the fact of the matter is I need to be devoting most of my time to research, and I can't be spending the entire day playing zookeeper. And if I get the collection to that certain point, that's exactly what I'll be doing, more manual labor and more maintenance and not the stuff that I really need to be doing. So I think that's going to be the best balance between there. And I'm really looking forward to having the opportunity to be able to just get my hands dirty, so to speak, and being able to get real observations of these animals, to bust through some myths about keeping them, and to just be able to speak from a personal level when I'm talking about how to keep them.
Good. That sounds fantastic. That sounds like I would be envious of the basement, I'm sure. For sure, I should say.
Happy place complete with a fluffy beanbag.
Exactly. Curl up, good book, listen to the sounds of everything moving around quietly.
Yeah, I don't think the camera's picking this up, but you can definitely hear the ocellated skinks posturing at each other through the leaf litter.
No, some animals we've only begun to understand what they actually do in their hierarchy and the way they interact with each other.
It's been really, really nice from home over the last couple of years, because before I would only get the perspective of what they were like during the day, in the evening after work. I didn't really get to see what they were doing, and I'm seeing activity patterns that I didn't see before, animals that I thought were pretty inactive that are actually fairly active.
Given the correct circumstances. Yep, absolutely. That's one of the biggest things that I've recognized is there's species that people say they don't move much. Well, you give them the right environment, it's the right time of day, you're gonna be completely surprised by that. It's pretty interesting. I look forward to hearing more about everything in the future. Obviously, keep us up to date. I'm
always working on something.
We're always here. We're not going anywhere, I'm sure. Been doing it forever. This is a new venture between Greg and myself, and hopefully it works out pretty well. And,
I hope so too.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to hang out with us and talk about what you got going on and talk about how you got started and whatnot. It's really nice to see some of the bigger names in this hobby willing to be down to earth and just say, hey, this is I was 4 years old in a dentist office, and or in a doctor's office, and they were playing with a sandfish skink with a pencil, and that's how I got started. I think it's fantastic. I think it's really awesome that everybody, this newer group of people is coming out, and I want to help. I want to make things better, and I hope it goes exponentially farther into the future for you.
Things are looking really promising.
Yep, it's great. All right, Greg, you got any final words? Nothing? Good?
No, I'm good.
You're good?
Thank you again, Mariah.
All right, Mariah, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it greatly.